2026 is a great year to be a Java developer and a Spring developer using the Spring framework. And I'm going to go over why that is. Of course, the most interesting thing going on at the moment is how AI and especially code generation is affecting things, which I'll touch on a little bit. So there's three things I'm going to go over. One of them is that Spring developers are thriving nowadays. There's a lot of activity, probably more than ever, and they're doing great there. It's the number one framework that's used for doing enterprise applications. That is, the applications running the world. It aligns perfectly with the top CIO priorities, what organizations are doing. And as always, it's got all of the great new features that developers want to use and is actually useful in the applications that you make. Now, like I said, AI is incredibly popular and impactful, if you'll pardon the phrase. And this is where Spring is really showing a lot of its worth and its value. I think that a lot of the people who are doing Spring development are working in private cloud settings. They're running and managing the stacks on their own, as we'll see. In that setting, where you're adding AI to your applications or you're using AI in your tool chain, the way that you're doing development, once again, Spring is very well positioned, especially when you pair it with a proper platform like the Tanzu platform. Now, all of that said, something that's very important for people to focus on in 2026, as it was in 2025 and all the 20s, is making sure that you are upgrading Spring, that you actually are using the newest versions of it, not only for those new features so that you can do AI stuff, but also so that you're delivering on security and performance that you want to have. Now, let's talk about the thriving nature of Spring. I think, especially if you're watching this and you're a Spring and Java developer, you have a sense of how much Java and Spring are used in the world. And when you actually look at the numbers around it, these numbers demonstrate that. You can see the amount of downloads that you have from various repos, the number of GitHub projects that are out there, all that kind of stuff that you use to track the momentum of Spring. You can also see the breadth of functionality. As always, Spring has a tremendous amount of libraries, right? The goal of Spring, at least, in my mind, from when I was doing Spring development, is to make it as easy as possible for developers to do the common things that they do over and over, day after day, and just to let them focus on the actual business logic, the application that they're doing, not all that wiring together and frameworky stuff. So there's other sources about the thriving nature of Spring. And let's look at it by looking at the usage of Java. Now, this is from the Red Monk Programmer Index. I used to work there quite some time ago. And you can see what they've tracked over the years based on conversation on the public internet and some of their own analysis, that is at Stack Overflow and GitHub. You can see that Java has consistently been in the top 3 for well over a decade. And this matches the intuition that you have, right? Everyone uses JavaScript. It makes sense. So it's almost like a secondary language that people have, although, it gains in popularity as its own thing in recent years. But Java has been up there forever, and only recently in the Red Monk Programming Index do you see that another language, Python, has taken over. Now, I still think that if you look at the bulk of Java running out there that's not on the public internet, where Red Monk is basing this survey data on, that you'll find that the majority of applications that are run on Java, and therefore they run on Spring. And therefore the majority of applications out there are using Spring. I think if you're using Java, you're probably using Spring, or at the very least, it's the number one framework out there. And to add credence to that, if we look at another analyst at IDC who focuses more on enterprises and their survey methodology doesn't just rely on public sources, what you see is that over the years, when they do their surveys, they see that in enterprises and large organizations that are doing business applications, Java is the language that's used the most there. Now, whatever surveys you look at, whatever they're based on, I think what you'll find is that the surveys match the intuition that you have. That especially when it comes to business workloads, as boring as that sound, but things at banks, insurance companies, manufacturers, retail, things that aren't basically taking pictures of cats wearing hats, eating sandwiches, or people dancing, or things like that, that Java is the underpinning of what those applications are and has been for decades. And again, if you think about the momentum and the importance that Spring has, also based on surveys and kind of intuition, Spring is probably the number one framework that's used in all of these applications. So therefore, having that knowledge is not only more relevant, but is going to allow you to have the widest amount of applications that you work on, the biggest, if you'll pardon the phrase again, impact, the most importance in what's going on in day-to-day in regular application development. Now, another way of looking at that is if you look at surveys about what the priorities of organizations are based on CIO priorities. You can look at the list that's here, and pretty much all of these map to what Spring will deliver for you. Now, security is always the top ranked one, and we'll get into how Spring if you keep it upgraded and run it in a proper environment, really addresses the security concerns that you have and has been relied on for decades by large organizations to do that. Now, if we look at these other things, especially things like modernizing applications, figuring out what to do with AI, putting it in applications, taking advantage of it, also getting performance improvements on infrastructure, I would argue that each of these things is something that Spring really helps with. It will help deliver on these priorities that your CIOs have. So think about this as far as the thriving nature of Spring. It's, by my reckoning, the number one framework used for the most enterprise applications, the most real applications out there. And this is derived from Java being likely the top language used to run these applications, and Spring being the top framework used there. If you look at what organizations are focused on, what they want to deliver on, their priorities, you can see how Spring helps out with every single one of these things and improves on these priorities. So now let's get into the AI part. Now, this is where Spring and Java, of course, really has strengths, and where you see that the nature of Spring, the philosophy that it has, and the investment that you have taken in learning Spring and doing it, and also as an organization, really starts to pay off. You can see the long-term strategy of Spring demonstrate itself when something new and interesting and very important like AI comes along. Now, the first thing is what you might call a flywheel effect, a perpetuating source of being good, if you will. And that is because Spring has been used for so many decades, and of course Java. If you look at all of those applications out there, there's so many of them written in Java. And more importantly, a word a Java developer will understand, the business logic is codified in Java code and therefore in Spring code. So what this means is that when you're using software, when you're writing software to run your business, right? You write the code and it personifies and does all the operational stuff. It does the process of your application, right? We all interact with businesses through software now. And so software is core to the business. If you took away software, if you took away all those Java apps, the business would collapse. And because of the importance of Java, I would definitely say civilization would have a bummer of a time after that if you just suck that all out there. But because there's this momentum, there's this huge amount of Java applications running the world, what you have is an expression of how businesses run, right? It's codified in there. You don't have to discover it and make it up. It's right there in the Java code. And not only does all that business logic in there, but it's actually running, it's performant, it's been road tested and battle hardened. We know how to run those things. And by definition, because it's there running civilization, it works. That's why I think you see when organizations are thinking about applying AI to their applications, putting AI in their applications, a huge amount of them go to Java because that's what they have, right? That's where the business logic is. That is that's the part in their stack, the software that they've written that runs their business. They don't want to just start off writing a brand new thing from scratch in Python, let alone TypeScript, even if they're vibe coding it or doing whatever work there, because you've got years of testing it, years of making sure it works. You've got years of day two operations that you need to do. And that's all taken care of with Java. All you need to do is add AI into your Java workflow. Now, when it comes to that, this is where the strategy of Spring, the long-term strategic value of Spring is incredibly important. Because if you've been watching the project Spring AI over the past even 2 years, you've seen, and a little bit before that, you've seen it consistently and very rapidly add whatever new AI functionality is there. You know, in the beginning, it was just about doing the classic Spring thing of having an abstraction over accessing whatever models you have, whether they're publicly hosted or locally hosted. Then it adds in support for evals, for tools. When MCP comes along, it adds that, and on and on and on, your multimodal things. If you follow this, it's actually astonishing the rate that they add these new features. But that's the point of Spring, is to always be that layer that is going to be bringing in the new functionality that you need to use for your applications, and having that be where you focus what you're doing and making it as quick and as possible for developers to use so they don't have to figure out how to do all of that integration. I mean, you know this, you're a Spring developer. But what you see here are all the things that Spring AI has been adding. And therefore, when you're using the Spring framework, using Spring AI, you just get all of this stuff for free. Now, let's look at a specific case of that. Last year, actually in 2024, when Anthropic came out with Model Context Protocol, MCP, the way of adding plugins and the way of adding tools, adding code to how you use AI, the Spring team's implementation was done very rapidly for doing it in Spring, and then it became the official implementation for doing MCP in Java. Now that's evolved over time, and it's gone from its own standalone implementation to Spring AI MCP. That's a great example of the strategic value of the Spring framework, is the team is constantly adding new things as they become valuable and useful. And you'll keep seeing that in Spring AI, which is why it's great that you've chosen to use that. So you don't have to shift over to a new framework to take advantage of AI in your applications. You don't have to learn it. You don't have to test it out. You just got to upgrade to start using the newer versions of Spring, so you get Spring AI in there. So let's look at the next thing that's important. I've talked a lot about the frameworks, the thing at the application layer, but what's really important is to think about the platform that you're running things on. Now, the first orientation here, if you work in a large organizations, those kind of organizations that use Java and that use Spring, chances are very high that the AI stuff that you're doing is going to be running on your private cloud. You can look at the survey that IDC and Broadcom did a little while ago, and it shows that a lot of the usage of AI, organizations, especially large ones, want to own it and control it. They don't want to just use the publicly hosted services. They need that control over it, which makes sense in highly regulated industries, from governments, pharmaceuticals, and especially finance. You really do need, as with any other service, you want to start off having as much control over it as possible and figure that out. Now, what this means for a Spring developer is that you will be relying on a platform, something running in your environment, in your private cloud, that's doing a lot of the work to host, provide access to, do those AI services, not to mention running your applications. Now, the issue that comes up with a lot of infrastructure providers in this kind of private cloud environment in an enterprise setting is that the infrastructure people, even fancy pants titles like platform engineering people, they think of what they need to do is deliver this to the developers, a blinking cursor. Now, if you've ever just been given like a cluster or a namespace or some templates and whatever configuration management stuff you've had, you've experienced this. The infrastructure team, maybe the platform team, if you want to stretch the definition of that, they've set up and run this, they're managing it, and now it's your responsibility to do all that work between the blinking cursor and how your application runs. Now, all of that work has nothing to do with the applications that you're doing, and I and many other people would argue it's not worth very much at all to your organization. It's worth it to have it, but to build and customize that on your own is not good at all. Now, there's all sorts of other reasons why building your own platform, why being given a blinking cursor as your platform is not good. But let me illustrate what a good platform looks like, especially for the needs of AI. Now, our own IT organization at Broadcom, which is a huge company you might have heard of, it has thousands of developers, and they had these needs as well, right? So they're running in a private cloud environment like most large organizations, and they really want to take advantage of using AI in the software development process to run MCP servers to connect to not only things on our own network, but Atlassian and GitHub and all these sorts of things. Of course, because they have the concerns of a regulated industry, they don't want to just let anyone run these things locally. They don't want their developers to have uncontrolled and unaccounted for running of MCP, which kind of slows down the ability to take advantage of AI. But what they found with a good platform in place, with the Tanzu platform, and you can see my kind of crude representation of it here, is that you can run these MCP servers in the platform, and this instantly gives them all the controls that they need for IT to allow developers to do this. Now, you can also run models. You can broker access to other models that you have, meaning that developers can start to, in a very secure, governed way, use AI in their tool chain. Now, this applies, of course, to when you're running AI as part of your application as well, right? You need a platform that provides these services, that allows your infrastructure people, your platform team, to bundle up these services for you, make them secure and govern them, and provide them to the developers to use. You don't want your developers working and building on top of that blinking cursor thing, right? If you want to read more details of that, I'm not really going to go into it here, but there's a great article written by some of my coworkers and also some recordings on Cloud Foundry Weekly that go over the implementation of this, how this kind of way of hosting MCP servers, again, whether it's for in your development tool chain or for it's actually running your applications. The architectural pattern that they've been using, that Broadcom is using, and others of our customers are using. And it's something that you can put in place now. And chances are high that you actually have the Tanzu platform and even the VMware stack, the VCF stack, a full private cloud stack that has this right now. You know, instead of having to build this out, having to test it out, all that kind of stuff, just like the Spring framework, you have this right now and can start using it to get moving and get using AI in that secure, governed way, both in when you're doing your development and also in the applications when you're running it. Now, let's look at a part that I think we all suffer from and we all know we could do better at, but is even more important right now in 2026, and it was important in 2025, when it comes to meeting those priorities people have, and especially thinking about how you're using AI in your apps. So, maybe it's not the case for you and your organization, but when you look at the versions of Spring and Java that people are running, we often hear that it lags behind. And we see this in the numbers, right? There's a high percentage of people who are downloading unsupported versions of Spring as a representation of this, right? There's tons of people who are running older versions of Spring, older version of Java, and they can't quite prioritize and get their organization to focus on upgrading. It seems like a lot of work, a lot of hassle. Usually they're motivated by external forces like price increases, as the Java world has been seeing, or the need for new functionality. Now, sometimes they're motivated by just having good architectural principles, which is what we would like. But when you look at surveys, there is this tangible feel with executives that I think the Spring community needs to connect to better, that the executives understand that they're running on older versions of IT, and it's really holding them back from features, from evolving their business based on the software that they're running. Now, this figure is actually from 2020, if you read the footnotes, but I would challenge you to think, has it really gotten better? Would executives in, let's say, most organizations say, oh yeah, we're totally fine with our IT. It has every single thing that we need. We can implement whatever features I can throw at them, and I can change the business on a dime to match what they need. I don't think so. I think maybe it's gone down probably 0 percentage points, and you would find the same thing if you asked executives. Let's look at another reason why it's important, and that is performance gains. So the first thing is that when it comes to cost and performance, every time you update your Java VM and also Spring along with it, you're just going to get performance improvements for free. Memory usage is less, CPU usage is less, things start faster, which means you can do the same with less, or you can do more with less or the same. But the point is upgrading, and we see this very frequently with our customers who go through the upgrade process, they start to save money. They start to be more efficient in their use because they don't need as much memory. They don't need as much compute to do things. And with the price of memory nowadays, it's a very valuable thing to look at. So that's a motivation for upgrading, is that it's proven that when you upgrade Java, when you upgrade Spring, you're going to consume less resources, you're going to have more efficient use of IT. And we see that over and over again. Now, also in the performance thing, when it comes to functionality, if you look at a recent performance test of Spring for MCP, what you'll see is that it's the most efficient, measured by latency and a few other things, MCP implementation out there. So again, this is showing you that all of the performance improvements when you're using a newer version of Java, when you're using a proper framework like Spring AI, you're going to get the most performant thing versus the other languages that are out there. Now, but this is the kind of thing that you see with Java, and it shows you again why that long-term strategic bet, not only on Java but on Spring, pays off consistently, no matter what is out there. So upgrading is hard, right? And we've observed this over the years. And over the past couple of years, we've really refined a tool that we have, the Tanzu Application Advisor, to make it as easy as possible to upgrade your applications. Now, this started off in Spring, but it's been changed to be more of a generic application upgrade thing. What it will do is it'll look at the applications that you have running in the platform, and it scans them, and using Open Rewrite and some of our own technology, it suggests not only the easy things to upgrade, but the more difficult things. And it gives you a way to automate as much of your upgrade as possible. As you can see from an example here, it not only shows you dependencies to upgrade, but it starts to go in using our recipes and standard Open Rewrite ones to show you the diffs for upgrading. Now, it sounds phenomenal, and it actually is. If you look at some of the customers that have talked about using this, here's one from Alight. It's sped up their ability to upgrade by 70%, as was mentioned on this panel at our conference at Explore last year. Now, my colleague Deshaun likes to talk about this, how he's seen other organizations go from a team of 5 people who have to rove around the organization, probably over the course of years. They're able to do upgrades of applications and services in an afternoon using this tool. So this is a tool, the Tanzu Application Advisor, again, that you probably have access to already, because most large organizations have the Tanzu platform or can easily start running it on top of their VMware stack. but you probably have access to start accelerating and speeding up the upgrades, because that's really what holds a lot of upgrade stuff back is it's just going to take us a long time. It's hard to analyze all this code, but you start using these new tools that you have, not to mention starting to use AI, which you are now running securely and highly governed in your platform environment, just like Broadcom's IT department is and other people, as I went over. And you can start to speed up that upgrade process, get those performance improvements, and also get access to new features, including AI things. Now, you can get access to some of that stuff with Tanzu Spring. It's our support offering around Spring. Not only does it bring you many of these options and support for it, but it's going to help with that securing and that governing side of things, right? It's going to help you make sure you're upgraded. And if you're not quite ready to upgrade, it has long-term support, LTS support around older versions, so that you can plan out your upgrading. But I think it's probably important to really focus on upgrading this year for those performance needs that I was going over. So I think to sum up, right, I think when I look at all of this, that this is the best time to be a Spring developer, a Java developer, and it's kind of always been the best time to be a Spring developer and a Java developer. Sure, there's other languages that are coming and helpful that have been used in this AI world. But as we apply AI, not only to the development phase, running tools and helping out in the tool chain, but also adding AI to your applications. Everything that you can do as a Spring developer, an organization already using Spring with decades of applications in there, is going to meet the CIO priorities, the priorities of your organization. You're going to be able to address performance and cost, security, but at the same time, have all of that built-in business logic, that knowledge of how an organization works, that's encoded into your applications that are really doing just fine now, if you think about it. And you'll be able to add in all of that AI functionality that you need. Now, I think the best way to do this, as you'll see when you talk with my colleagues, is to run your Spring applications in the Tanzu platform. We're the people who work on Spring. We're the stewards of the project. We have the most people committing. I've shown you that they're constantly adding new features. We wrote the official implementation for MCP in Java, and now it's in Spring AI. So we have all of the knowledge, the work, and the kind of, care and stewardship of Spring running in the Tanzu platform. There's a very tight integration between the two. It's the easiest, the best place for organizations to run their Java apps. And like I keep saying, you probably have access to it already, so you can just start using it. So if you want to get the slides, there's a link to get it right now, and I'll put a link below in the notes here. But you can get over them, click on those things, look up all these studies yourself. And with that, thanks. And I hope you have a good time doing your application development. You've made a wise choice by working with Spring.